Well, thanks to Jesse and BCM Be Well. I'm always impressed with the quality of programming that they put on, and I know how hard they work behind the scenes. I'd love to think that you love nutrition and that's why you're there, but Vitality Points rock, and so I'm not offended if you said the primary reason I came was my Vitality Points. So Jesse came up with the title enGRAINed because honestly that's what we do. We have ingrained beliefs about food. Our culture is going to determine that, where the part of the world you were raised in, what your parents thought was good nutrition. I use this example all the time because it's a massive failing on my part. When I was growing up, my mother always told me that drinking hot orange juice would make my cold go away. I'm a junior in college, a dietetic program before I said, I don't think that really makes any sense. But because my mom told me, I made the assumption that it had to be factually true because why would your mom ever tell you something that wouldn't be true about food? Parenting style, the way you were raised, and maybe the way you raised your children regarding food beliefs is really pretty critically important. Even though you're adult, oftentimes the way your household treated food is going to be important. How you divide your food up between carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, we've learned a lot in the last 5 years about a lot of the things that we're doing wrong, particularly with breakfast. There's environmental triggers. You all know your environmental triggers, as well as some of the brave new world of what is your own genetic makeup and how does that influence body weight and appetite. So what influence does culture have? Well, when you look around the world, not here necessarily in the United States, breakfast in many cultures is the biggest meal of the day. It's going to be eggs and sausage and maybe tomatoes and soup and rice and fruit. Where when you think of the American culture, most of us would say, I don't have time. I don't have time. But setting that stage, looking at how you start your day, as we're going to talk about, is critical on how you finish the day, how hungry you are throughout the day. So when you think about your own breakfast, you really have to examine, how did you grow up? Did your family skip breakfast? Did you not eat breakfast on a regular basis? Now, if you're a working parent, how do you get kids out of the house? What has that breakfast meal become for you? And breakfast meals throughout all cultures are going to be a mix of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And maybe we're, as Americans, the exception to the rule. We'll come back to that. The way you were raised is really pretty critical. So when you think about parenting styles, you want parents to hold their children accountable, but be supportive at the same time. And that's that authoritative parenting style. The relationship is reciprocal, it's responsive, there's a lot of bi-directional communication. So it could be, you're not going to serve candy for breakfast, right? But you might give your child a choice. What would you rather have today? Would you rather have scrambled eggs or would you rather have French toast? So you're asking for participation, but you're setting the ground rules because most 5-year-olds aren't going to make great decisions about food, right? It would be, could I have Skittles? Let me have some potato chips. It's not generally going to be a great choice. Undemanding and permissive means, get what you want. I don't want to fight a battle. So it's easier for me to give you something that I know isn't really very great for you, but I just don't want to fight it. So you're not demanding anything from your child and you give in. I'm going to see these parenting styles blend because I'd raise my hand. There have been times at the checkout where I was just way too tired and it was easier for me to give my child a snack that they wanted because I didn't want the drama. So I'm not saying anybody is going to be one parenting style. Authoritarian is, you do what I say because I tell you what to do, and there's not a reciprocal relationship. And I can honestly say I love my parents to death. That was more of my household. This is what you eat. I really don't care what you want. This is that authoritarian, demanding, but not terribly supportive. And then certainly in my role at Texas Children's, I really saw a lot of rejecting or neglecting parenthood where meals weren't provided and things like that. But that's oftentimes certainly not going to be our parenting styles here. How you were fed as a child absolutely determines the way you look at food and parenting as an adult, even if you don't think so. Even if you think, well, thank goodness I'm not my mother. chances are you've got a little bit of that in you, and all of a sudden you catch yourself saying something that your mom told you about food when you were growing up, and you think, I just didn't let that come out of my mouth. So we are a part of our cultural and parenting heritage. Parents who are permissive and indulgent and not unresponsive have children who choose fewer fruits and vegetables because there's not any encouragement to eat that. Parents who monitor intake, they're authoritative, have children who drink fewer sweetened beverages because the choice is really not given, right? You're saying you want water or milk with a meal, but you're really not allowing some of these unhealthy behaviors, so that's not surprising. The most protective parenting style is that authoritative, asking your children what they want, and again, is it enough food? The example I also pick on my youngest son in particular. The example I use all the time, he ran track in high school, and he ate dinner one night, and ate a big dinner, and then he came down for a snack, and he came down 10 times. And my response was, you can't possibly need that amount of food. And got to be about 11 o'clock, and he said, Mom, I'm still hungry. And I said, well, baby, you got to get up and run the next morning, so make it count. Didn't tell him what to eat. Made a 20-inch sub sandwich and a 20-ounce glass of milk, and I said, are you still hungry? And he said, yeah, I am still hungry, but I got to go to bed. If I had jumped in there and said, you just ate dinner, you can't have a snack, then I'm basically overriding his biology, and that's what that authoritarian eating style is. And parents oftentimes will ask me, well, how much food should a 5-year-old eat? And my response is, I really don't know. If you give them healthy choices and you let them decide when they're hungry and full, and you don't order, do a short order kitchen where you're going to make them whatever they want whenever they want it, you actually let children lead, and you are the guiding template, and that kind of behavior is the most protective. In my experience working with people with eating disorders, it is that you do what I want you to do because I tell you to do it. Those children oftentimes are not allowed to respond to their own hunger and satiety cues. They binge, they sneak food because there's not that bi-directional communication that goes along with that. And as adults, other than our parenting style and the way that we were raised, why do we choose the foods that we do? I'd love to tell you nutrition is in the top 10. It isn't. It isn't. It is taste and convenience. And now with DoorDash and Uber Eats, you can just look on your app and order something, and it is as convenient. You don't have to drive anywhere to get food. Now the food comes to you, so you're shopping on your phone when you're really hungry, and you know in 30 minutes they'll bring you whatever, and then you're shopping with your eyes, and the convenience is there, and you know that the taste is going to be there. So I'm going to be interested to follow the literature on what these meal delivery services, again, where you're ordering, not like Blue Apron and some of the other ones that are out there, but where you can actually order. Are we going to see an increase in body weights in this culture? Because now the food is unbelievably convenient. For us here, it could be a vending machine. You are really hungry, you didn't bring a snack from home. What is convenient is the pretzels or the M&Ms in the vending machine because it's absolutely convenient. So I love this graphic of a canned peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, come on now, how much work is it to make a PB&J? Not a whole lot, but somebody's capitalizing on this taste and convenience. What influence does the amount of carbohydrate, protein, and fat have on your meal planning and your appetite? And this is where, if you go back and think of those cultural influences on food, how people in different parts of the world eat, everybody had protein on their plate. Protein has the biggest effect on satiety, meaning that you feel full longer when you've had a protein-rich meal. No mystery with that. And I've gotten to the point where if you tell me your breakfast is going to be a bowl of cereal, 3 grams of protein, almond milk, no protein, and juice, I'm almost to the point of telling you to skip. Mostly because I'm setting you up to be biologically, this is not discipline. This is not, I need to have better willpower. This is frank biology. And if you start out with a really high carbohydrate load versus a protein load, as I'm going to show you, the research is pretty clear. You tend to overeat, and it continues throughout the day. So now you have a bagel with juice for breakfast. You go by your coworker's desk. You want another carbohydrate load, so you grab a piece of candy. At lunch, you have a sandwich and a piece of fruit. Not a bad choice. But the protein is one slice of meat. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're craving pretzels. And it's this carbohydrate need, biological need, all day long because you didn't look at the first and foremost. If there's a rule, I'll give it to you as a rule. You got to have protein. And the protein needs to be at each meal. You can't have protein only at the end of the day and expect to get that. So although people don't like graphics like a plate, I actually love teaching people the plate method because then any of your cultural foods would fit. So if you like fish and rice for breakfast, you can put that on that plate graphic easily. You're going to have 25% of your plate fish, 25% of your plate something starchy, and then you're going to have a fruit or a vegetable. So I'm going to take you back just a bit. And so if you look at Brazil, for example, there's not a whole lot of carbs, but there's actually toast underneath there. They've got ham and toast, and half the plate is fruit. Just happens to be maybe not a fruit that you would eat all the time, but it certainly fits that plate graphic. So when we're talking about maximizing your fullness, so you can honestly eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, that's the ultimate goal. So in the world of nutrition, and particularly in weight management, we always talk about intuitive eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. But if you've messed with your biology early in the day, you lose that biological protective mechanism. My son Kevin, eating those 10 snacks, he ate when he was hungry, he stopped when he was full. Problem was he never really got full because he was biologically hungry. We do that to ourselves by not organizing our plate. We make ourselves biologically hungry, and then the media tells us what? You don't have any self-discipline. This is all willpower. I'm not saying there's not willpower involved, because there is, but you don't want to walk into an environment where you're chronically hungry. So if you're out to dinner with friends and you are starved, I'm going to tell you to eat your protein first. Eat your protein first. Because now I'm already capitalizing on some of the satiety I'm looking for. Protein delays gastric emptying time, which means it hangs out in your stomach for a longer period of time. The longer food hangs there, that's why fiber works as well. The longer food hangs in your stomach, the more likely you are to alter your biology and not overeat. If I started with bread, chips, and salsa, I can honestly keep eating and I'm not going to feel full. So it's not saying you can't have chips and salsa when you go and get Mexican food. It's maybe you need to eat the fajita meat first and put chips on your plate, but that becomes second because we're going to capitalize on that. The protein doesn't have to be animal protein. So if you're vegetarian and you like tofu, or you're pescatarian and you don't eat red meat, it really doesn't make any difference. You can get this protein in beans, you can get it in tofu, so it doesn't have to be an animal-based protein. So how to structure your day? High protein breakfast. Got to come up with a lot of different ways of doing this. Reducing carbs at breakfast and only eating ones that are high in fiber. I don't work for this company, have no stock in this company, but Kashi Goleen is an example of a high fiber, higher protein food. Problem is, it doesn't have quite as much protein. So with all the smart people in this room, how could I make this breakfast better? Kashi Goleen is a good start, but what am I going to add? Eggs. Now, okay, you can add eggs, but that means you have to do what? You have to cook eggs, right? You have to cook eggs. So you might think, all right, you know what? My day is so hectic in the morning. I'm going to make a dozen hard-boiled eggs on Sunday, and then I'm going to have something to grab and go. I would tell you to make it really easy. Peel them, put them in a bowl, and put plastic over because the eggs will absorb food from your refrigerator. And now you've got Kashi Goleen, high protein, high fiber. You've got an egg, and you could have a carton of yogurt. People who know me know that Siggy's is my favorite brand because it's a higher protein yogurt. And so now, without cooking something in the morning, you've got a high protein breakfast that's rolling out the red carpet so you can actually decide, what am I experiencing? Is it biological hunger or is it a craving? Biological hunger doesn't go away unless you eat. Cravings will go away when you wait. If you wait, you distract yourself, you come up with something else, a craving will go away, biological hunger won't. So if it's 10 o'clock in the morning and you think, oh my goodness, I'm really hungry, I'm going to distract myself, I'm going to go back and maybe check some facts and figures for my job, you distract yourself, and the hunger is worse, I'm going to tell you go get a snack, because if you get yourself really hungry, most people don't control their intake very well if they get biologically hungry. We've all heard that term, hangry. I think we know it's real, okay? Eating that high carbohydrate breakfast like bagel or juice or regular cereal can leave you hungrier all day long. If you grew up skipping breakfast because you were too busy or too tired, this is a fundamental shift for you. If you are not a breakfast eater, this is a fundamental shift for you. So what we know about changing habits is we don't change habits overnight. None of us do. Despite best intents, that really doesn't work. It takes about 3 weeks for something that you want to do to become a habit. And during that 3-week period of time, if you want to say, I'm going to start eating breakfast, you might have to set an audible alarm on your phone to remind you. You might have to plan a little bit on the weekends, because just thinking about it doesn't turn it into an action step, because it's not your habit. If your habit is you get in the car and you go through the drive-thru at Starbucks and you get coffee and you go, you really have to practice doing something fundamentally different. So if you're a breakfast skipper, this is hard to do. Both a high carbohydrate diet without protein or skipping breakfast can set you up for failure. If I'm going to give you the two, the one that's going to be the worst for you is that really high carbohydrate breakfast. It's going to set you up for failure. Adding protein to meals, and I've done this, might surprise you, I'm not 21. I've done this for a long enough period of time to watch fads come and go. And so for a short-term period, we embrace coconut oil as like the best thing ever, until the American Heart Association comes out and says, okay, you clowns, stop doing this. It's really not a cardioprotective fat. Stop doing this. So we see these trends come and go. What we're really trying to do is get away from the trends and stick with the biology. So the biology is you really have to have lean meat. So if you're not going to go with a plant-based protein, the meat needs to be lean, because in the world of weight management, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full, calories always count. So if I'm trying to help you maintain a lean weight, or I'm trying to help you to not gain weight, or I'm trying to help you to lose weight, lean always makes a difference. Absolutely does. So when you see the paleo diet saying you can eat unlimited amounts of bacon, there will be a payback to that. Unlimited amounts of cheese. There will be a biological payback to doing that. And the biology may not be that you end up having a massive weight gain. It could be that you end up increasing your likelihood of certain cancers and cardiovascular disease. So how do I pick? When you go to the store, loin equals lean. So you're looking at steak, and it says ribeye. You hear any loin in that name? Nope. Porterhouse? Nope. Now you have top sirloin. Okay, that's going to be a leaner choice. Beef tenderloin is filet mignon. So it may not be, filet mignon doesn't have loin in the name, but it is beef tenderloin. Pork tenderloin. So are you getting a pork shoulder roast, no loin in the name, or are you getting a pork tenderloin? The difference is high-fat meats are 100 calories an ounce. And Jesse gave me some tools. You know how good Jesse is with tools. Here's my little fish guy. I'll use my fish guy. He is going to be about 3 ounces of meat. And this is going to be a lean meat. So if I said this is 3 ounces of meat, meat is about the size of the palm of your hand. I don't think you're going to eat the head and tail. Maybe you might, I don't know. But it's going to be about the size of your cell phone. That's about 3 ounces of meat. And 3 times 30 is only 90 calories. So now I've got some real quality protein. 3 ounces of ribeye is 300 calories. So think about that when you go out to eat. You're clearly not getting 3 ounces of meat, right? A small steak in many restaurants is 6. Sometimes 6 is hard to get, it's 8. So if you get an 8-ounce ribeye before you got anything else on your plate, you've had 800 calories. You've had 800 calories. That's why lean always makes a difference. The protein is the same. The difference is the amount of fat that's in that food. So you always want to go with that lower fat source. This study I absolutely love, and it was actually done at UTMB Galveston. Heather Leedy did this study, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and she took a look at breakfast-skipping adolescents and then gave them either a no-protein, NP diet, cereal, milk, not very high in protein, or a high-protein breakfast, which was a breakfast wrap, 2 ounces of lean meat, and which is 2 servings of eggs, and 1.5 servings of dairy, about 20 grams of protein at that meal. And then here was her observed effects. Eating a higher protein breakfast had benefits throughout the day. They didn't control, these were all teenagers, they didn't control what they ate. They said, here is your breakfast. You eat breakfast A or breakfast B. The rest of it was choose what you want. Okay, so it was ad lib. They had better appetite control when they had the higher protein breakfast. They had reduced food, motivation, and reward. So you know how if you're really hungry and you eat a brownie, you think, oh my goodness, that was delicious, or whatever. It may be savory for you. It may be a bag of chips. So the reward is, boy, was that delicious. In Leedy's work, the answer was, no, it isn't. It's good. I still like it, but it didn't have the biological reward. Improves satiety, reduces evening snacking. So if you're that evening snacker, you come home from work, it's after dinner, and you're watching, I guess Scandal's not on, you're watching whatever show you love, Game of Thrones, for those of you who do that. You're watching your favorite show, and you're finding that you're going to the kitchen grazing. That's where we say that protein effect can last all day long. So if you leave here with one thing today is, I really want you to make sure that you have a high protein breakfast and fundamentally change that. Why does this work? Well, there's lots of reasons. Some of it, the thought is, it fundamentally changes the hormones that your gut produces that signal hunger and fullness, ghrelin, PYY, GLP-1. You see some really nice changes in these fullness and hunger hormones. The hunger hormones are tamped down, the fullness hormones are ramped up. So they actually did some really nice exploratory work saying, why does this work? So think about your cultural beliefs about food and how you can now jump into something else. So under most conditions, eating protein is more satiating than eating the same amount of calories and carbohydrate or fat. Modest increase in protein at the expense of carbohydrate or fat can promote satiety and help with weight loss. Here's what else we know about weight loss. If you're trying to lose body fat, right? You're not trying to lose your muscle mass. If you're trying to lose body fat and hang on to your lean mass, your muscle mass, you need more protein per kilogram of body weight than any Houston Texan. Protein needs are the highest, biologically the highest, for people who are trying to actively lose body fat. So if you said, my goal is I want to lose 15 pounds of body fat, because if you said 15 pounds of weight, I'm going to correct you, 15 pounds of body fat, I'm going to really ramp up the protein, because not only do I want you to feel biologically full, I don't want you to lose lean body mass. And what we're seeing in my generation and beyond is we're seeing that people who have chronically dieted their whole adult life, whatever it was you did it. It could have been Atkins, it could have been Pritikin, it could have been whatever the diet du jour was or is. People end up losing lean body mass. If you diet and you don't increase the protein and you don't strength train, the elliptical isn't going to do it for you. You don't lift weights, you will lose muscle every single time you start the new diet. So your protein needs go up when you want to actively lose body fat. And I'm going to encourage you, whether it's 24-hour fitness, whatever BCMB Well promotes, I think it's 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness, you can get discounted memberships. I'm going to encourage you to give yourself that gift, is to learn how to strength train, so you're not going to be that person who's 80 years old and you're walker dependent because you've lost so much muscle mass. Chronic dieting without increasing protein and strength training absolutely does that. And then what ends up happening is, as you lose muscle, your metabolic rate, which is kind of the engine of your car, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so to maintain your body weight is fewer and fewer calories. So when you look at the normal adult American woman, she gains about 25 pounds from the time she's 20 to 45. And part of this is our culture of repeat dieting and repeat dieting. So this whole idea of protein and organizing your plate and increasing protein when you're trying to change your body composition is critical not only for now, it's critical for you 20 years from now when you're maybe in the middle of your career, at the end of your career. Environmental, we are all exposed to this all the time. Plate sizes are larger than they've ever been. I love Pappasitos, but they serve you on a platter. You can honestly say a Pappasitos platter is at least 2 servings. But when it's put in front of you, what happens? You eat what's in front of you, and I'll give you some data on that in a minute. Portion sizes are out of control, food is everywhere, and then we have the media, okay? So what you are served is different than what a serving is. So when you look at that hamburger and French fries, the French fries are occupying about 50% of that plate. In that plate graphic, did we have 50% of your plate being French fries? It's a starch, it's not a vegetable. So you can see that's really not the balance that we're looking for. The key thing is I'm not going to tell you not to have French fries. You're all adults, you get to make up your own decision. But you've got to look at the amount and say maybe the amount that I'm eating is the issue. It's not the food, because if you go back to 1950 or 1954 when McDonald's opened, they had a small hamburger. Their small fries were smaller than what's in the Happy Meal now, and the soda was 6 ounces. 6 ounces, not a 32-ounce big gulp, okay? So now we look at this and say, you know what, McDonald's is the reason I'm overweight. Well, I don't work for McDonald's, so I can criticize them and talk about the science in just a second. They actually were the first fast food restaurant that came out with a veggie patty. It was called McLean, lasted 4 months. So what we say we want from our fast food companies, that's not what we buy. Okay? We want the value meal. We want to feel like we're getting the most of money for our dollar. And I always say, well, your value meal is now translated into how much you get to pay for cardiovascular disease from these habits of eating this. So yeah, you may get more bang for your buck now, but you end up paying later on from this fast food. So if you look at the hamburger, in order to be that 3 ounces, what happens to the hamburger? It's now half. So when you talk about label reading and serving sizes, you have to understand what you're served is not the legal definition of a serving size. And this is, to me, where we all go wrong, is this: we're over-consuming maybe 50 to 100 calories a day, and now by the end of the year you've gained 10 pounds. It didn't come on overnight. It's the subtle weight creep from increased portions. So Jesse and his cute little guys, if you look at a pancake, it's the size of a CD. It's not the size of my head. So if you go to IHOP and they give you a 3-stack pancake and the pancake is the size of the plate, that's 2, maybe 3 servings for one pancake. But you count it in your food diary as what? You count it as 1. So by the end of the day, you say, I don't understand why I'm gaining weight. I had 3 pancakes. And you do the math, and you're at 4,000 calories, but the number of items you ate wasn't egregious. It wasn't that you were eating all day long. It's the portion size was huge. And meat, again, size of a deck of cards. 3 ounces of meat is about the depth of a deck of cards. So think about what you serve yourself. Now, the exception I would make is if you're actively trying to lose weight. For most of the women in this room, I would add at least 50%. Maybe some of the men in this room, I'd actually double this. I'd want to make sure that I've got adequate amounts of protein to make sure that we're maximizing satiety. We also know that environmentally, we've lost the family meal. So if you're someone, if you have children, if you go home and cook at night, I'm going to tell you you're my heroes, because that's a dying tradition. We eat in front of a television, we eat in a car, we eat out of a bag. And what we know is that environmentally, when you eat with somebody versus eating by yourself, you chat. Now I'm chatty, can you imagine eating dinner with me? You know, I talk fast, walk fast, eat fast. So I'm chatting with you, you're responding, and I'm shoveling as fast as I can, so I'm kind of violating my own rules. But we know that families that eat together with their children have less disordered eating. Now remember your parenting style. You're not going to try and control what you're putting down that child's plate. You're going to ask for participation. Less alcohol and substance abuse, positive self-esteem, better school performance, less depression, and less suicidal thoughts. So what this illustrates to me is we are social creatures. We are not meant to eat in isolation. We're meant to eat with each other. So if you ever want a really fabulous book on the way the world eats and people that are really healthy within the world, it's a fabulous book called The Blue Zones. And The Blue Zones takes a look at countries of the world that have the longest healthy lifespan, because they were looking for what diet. You know, should it be low carb, high carb, what should it be? And what they discovered is, yes, diet made a difference. People who ate more fruits and vegetables, leaner proteins, did a little bit better. They did a little bit better. That was factually true. But what was true in the four cultures that they studied, one was Sardinia, Italy, one was Loma Linda, California, Greece, and Okinawa, is that what made the longevity wasn't just the quality of food, and yes, the quality of food was really great. No rhyme or reason as to how much carbohydrate, protein, or fat. But they ate meals together, and they had social support. Whether it was faith-based, whether it was people got together and ate meals, what made a difference in longevity and how much they moved. You know, most of these cultures were walking 10 to 15,000 steps a day. They were moving. But what made a difference was all of those components. It wasn't just controlling the dietary variable. It was, what was the community like? How many friends did somebody have? Again, further illustrating to me that if you eat a quality diet that's culturally based, you don't need to change because someone says you need to do something different. But what you need to maintain is some degree of physical activity and some sense of community in your family or your church or however that works for you, because we are social creatures. Plate sizes say we fill up our plates, regardless of the size. How many of y'all can honestly say when you went to Papacitos and got fajitas that you looked at this and said, this is way too much food, I won't be able to eat it? Probably not most of y'all, because it was a complete plate of food. It was normed with what everybody else at the table was getting. And I think Papacitos, no, I'm picking on them. I think they have a fabulous salad. I love their salad. I bought it and took it home one time. It was 4 dinner plates mounded. 4, I could mound it. So it was a family of 4 for one salad. And I remember eating there one time, I thought, man, I'm stuffed. And of course, being a dietitian, I'm thinking, oh, I had a lot of protein. There's a lot of fiber in this meal. It was the portion size. And I only ate half of it, but I ate 2 entire plates of food. That I probably, one would have been enough, but we eat what's in front of us, and about 92% of the food that's served is eaten, regardless of the size. So if you have 9-inch dinner plates, go to an 8. You're not going to notice a significant difference in your hunger and fullness, but you're making a decision that I'm going to eat a little bit less, and I'm going to control my environment. And some of the cute plates that are out there, Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, it's really hard to tell what they are because they're now maybe beveled and they're deep, and so now you can, it's more sort of like a plate bowl. I don't know what that would be, but it's a kind of plate bowl mix. And now you really don't know what you're getting because plate sizes have become decorative. The media, wow. We could spend hours talking about this. If you don't think you're vulnerable, maybe you're not because you never listen to the radio, you never are on the internet, and you never watch television. And you certainly aren't on Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram on your phone. We are all exposed to media influences every single day that do a bunch of things. One, they give us unrealistic expectations of body type, and we're going to talk about body type. Unrealistic expectations. If you're Kim Kardashian and you've got all the money that you want, and you can get butt implants and breast implants, and you've got personal trainers and chefs, I would expect at some point in time you're going to look different than someone who's a Baylor employee publishing scientific research, working hard at your desk. You don't have someone cooking for you when you go home. But we look at that as the cultural norm. Whether you can identify with that or not, you can watch what happens to consumers' perception of beauty. There's a fabulous study done with Marilyn Monroe. And for those of you who are old enough to know who she was considered an icon of beauty in the 50s. Her BMI is 25. So if she walked into a clinic at Baylor, she's going to get anticipatory guidance on she's overweight. If you looked at Marilyn Monroe, looking at her, she never thought she was overweight. And if you ask people of that generation, was this woman overweight? The answer was no. She was considered an icon of beauty. She had curves, she was voluptuous, all these positive descriptors. Now, a quality health indicator in an electronic medical record means you need to document she's overweight by BMI standards. Think about what that's done to us as humans when we start to see thinner and thinner body types being cosmetically altered in every venue. Think of what that does with our children. Think of what that does with our children. One of the greatest things for me working in pediatrics and working with young kids was kids are very concrete thinkers. It's right or wrong, it's black or white, you're good or bad, and then hopefully as you grow up you can abstract a little bit and say, well, maybe not everything is good or bad, maybe it's somewhere in between. But when you're that really concrete thinker and what you see, you can't comprehend Photoshop. You can't comprehend that. So with the image that you're seeing, you don't know at 7 or 8 years old has been digitally altered because that's not the world you live in. You look at your parents, they're not altered, right? They're just normal people. So now what you see becomes this reality. Body fat, and one of my favorite psychologists is in the room, Beth Garland, body fat and shaming is because you're anonymous. You can call out somebody on social media with horrific words. And working in the public school system and working, and I always say I was in schools that nobody else wanted to go into, that what you would see, what you would absolutely see, is people would look at their body and say, well, there's something wrong with me, and I'm fat, and you'd hear all these self-deprecating words. And what got you sent to the principal was if you talked about somebody's race or religion. You could get yourself expelled and go to an alternative school. You could call somebody fat, you could call somebody stupid, and you didn't get punished. You didn't get punished. So what became very popular, because you knew you were going to get expelled if you used a racial expletive, you knew you were going to get expelled, you knew you were going to alternative school, so everybody became fat. Hurling an insult was, you're fat. So you see normal weight kids coming into an eating disorder clinic, they never were overweight. But they're being told by their peers as part of the shaming process, you're fat. And social media and Snapchat, oh my goodness, it's honestly heartbreaking. So we set unrealistic expectations on an ideal diet, ideal body shape, Instagram models, I don't know why that's a thing, but it is. And then outrageous nutritional claims. The Food Babe has 105,000 followers. There's nothing evidence-based on her site, nothing. But people love her because she'll say, if you go to Subway, you're eating chemicals like are in your yoga mat. And now on Netflix, What the Health is out there, basically telling you don't even drink water. I don't know what your food options are left, because you can't eat meat, you can't eat starch, you can't eat vegetables, because everything is toxic. We have people wanting to detox their bodies, not understanding that if you have a liver, your liver might need some help with some quality food and maybe some abstinence from alcohol and controlling body weight. You don't need to detox. You got a liver. Everybody in this room, 100% guarantee, or you wouldn't be here, you have a liver. But we buy into this because it's outrageous. And then when it doesn't work for us, rather than questioning the media, we think, well, you know what? I got an endocrine problem. I got to go see an endocrinologist. I need thyroid. Something's wrong with me, because we're not understanding that what they were selling wasn't science to begin with. So I say this all the time, nutrition is a science, it's not an opinion. If I give you my opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion. And my opinion might be what works for me, but I always, as A Baylor employee, and B, as a registered dietitian, I have to lead with the science. I have to tell you what the science will say. So you could say, I had great results with coconut oil. I lost a bunch of weight. I love this stuff. I might acknowledge that worked for you, but that's not where the science is taking us. That's not where the science is taking us. And unfortunately, when we talk about fake news is infiltrating science, it's infiltrating nutrition and exercise performance. When I heard there was, at the CrossFit Games, there were 37 torn pectoral muscles. If you're a strength coach in the NFL and 37 of your players tore a pec, you're fired. You're absolutely fired. CrossFit has some benefits. It's hard exercise, and I think people don't exercise hard enough, but it's often in an unregulated, unsupervised. The person gets a weekend certification, and all of a sudden they're a CrossFit master because they went and learned the workout of the day in a box, and they've got all these fancy buzzwords. Does it work? Sure, if you're going to go pound steel and lift heavy weights, it's going to work, but there's a downside to that. And so as consumers, every single day, we're bombarded with those. And again, for kids, it just makes me really sad. And that's why if you have children, they need the parent filter. They need to understand that if they see something or you see something on TV together, that you stop, you pause it, or at least you turn down the sound and say, well, you know that's not factually true. You know that's not the way your body works, and give them that balance. So when you start to take a look at how bad and pervasive this is, nearly a third of kids 5 to 6 would choose an ideal body size thinner than their current size. So there's already body dissatisfaction in kindergarten. By age 6, children are aware of dieting. They might have tried it. 26% of 5-year-olds recommend a dieting behavior to someone who needs to lose weight. So our kids are now being exposed to what is a diet. To me, a diet is what you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is calorie restriction. So it's not surprising that you see kids who don't trust their own regulation. They don't know that they can eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full, and that there's foods. All foods are going to have different nutritional qualities, but the minute we start saying, well, don't ever eat that, that's bad for you. Well, generally the stuff that's bad for you, what? Does it taste good? Yes. So now we're giving them this message, well, you really like this food, but don't eat it. That just doesn't honestly make any intuitive sense. So the new frontier, let me make sure, the new frontier is genetics. And I think we don't spend enough time talking about inherited body types. So as part of this genetic piece, you have, and there are varying degrees of this, there are 3 major types of body. One is endomorph, and these are individuals that, despite eating well, they can be strong as all get out. They are just going to carry more body fat. So if you're unhappy with your body type, it's genetic, and you can go back and fuss at your parents for that. Mesomorph is, quite honestly, the body type that most men would want to have. So if I'm giving you a mesomorph, I'm going to tell you LeBron James. If you're not a basketball fan, most people in Houston love J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt is a mesomorph. That is his genetic body type. You saw him have surgery, and he lost a bunch of lean weight, and he's back to where he was before. You can tell when that man is in the weight room. He has a very muscular body type. The ectomorphs are people that are tall and lean. These are usually distance runners. Cyclists are oftentimes that ectomorphic body type. Lance Armstrong is an example of an ectomorph, tall and lean. These people struggle to gain weight. They literally struggle to gain weight. They can eat a lot of food. They just struggle adding more mass. They can go to the weight room. They can lift, and they're not going to really see muscular hypertrophy. And then there's variations in between. So if you want to know what your body type is, a good thing to do is look at your adult parents. And you can oftentimes tell. So when you look at people like Oprah Winfrey, and again, she's very visible, and her dieting behaviors have been very visible. If you look at both of her biological parents, they were both endomorphs. So despite her doing a lot of right things, and she's very public about what she does and what she doesn't do, despite doing a lot of right things, she's not going to be this big around. It's just not in her DNA. So we may like or not like our genetically inherited body type, but it is what it is, and it helps you, whether you like it or not, to set more realistic expectations. So if you're that endomorph, Losing 10 pounds may be infinitely more difficult for you than it might be your ectomorphic friend. And I come from a family where my 2 sisters are ectomorphic and I'm not. So my younger sister, I remember her eating a family pack of pork chops. 5'9", 115 pounds, can't gain weight to save her life. I thought, are we biologically related? How did I end up in literally the short end of the gene pool? Why am I there? And it's like, so they used to tease me and say, we don't really think you're part of the family. You have darker skin, you're shorter, you're heavier, you are not biologically related. So I went growing up thinking, uh-oh, you know, who is my dad? You know, so I had all these issues as a kid because I have 2 biological sisters, I'm assuming, that are ectomorphic body types. I'm making a big assumption here, that they're ectomorphic body types. So they could always way out eat me, even though I exercised infinitely more than they did. It's just the genetic luck of the draw. What we're seeing now is with the, the exome and all the things that we're learning about our own DNA, there are some genes that are identified with obesity. I'm going to caution you on this because it's coming, whether it's 23andMe, Ancestry.com, this kind of stuff is coming. And there are some genes that have a strong association with obesity. And probably the leading one now is something called the FTO gene. It's been dubbed, if you read Time magazine or any of those magazines, you'll look at it and say, they'll talk about the fat gene. And that if you have 2 copies of the high-risk allele, you are, on average, 6 to 7 pounds heavier than someone who doesn't have that. You have more mid-body fat than someone who doesn't have that. So we're now looking at, are you behind the genetic 8 ball? But if you know anything about genetics, and I know about this much, if you know anything about genetics, there are things that can alter gene expression. So with the FTO gene, yes, the FTO gene is one of these genes that sets you up for a higher % body fat, but a modifier of the FTO gene is exercise. A modifier of the FTO gene is vitamin D. So just because you have a genetic complement, I wouldn't want you to think that you're doomed. So I had some genetic testing done when I was at Dr. Weil. You know Dr. Weil, the kind of guru of wellness. He's bald and he has a white beard and he runs integrative nutrition out in Arizona. And I was speaking at that conference there and they offered genetic testing. And I thought, I'm going to get this done just to see. And so I had 2 copies of the high-risk allele and I said, okay, well maybe that's why my sisters are skinny and I've never been skinny. Maybe that's the issue and maybe that's one of my drivers that I've almost compulsively, I guess I need to go see a therapist, compulsively exercised my whole life. Is maybe that's just the genetic 8 ball that I inherited, but I don't know that for other women my height that I'm 7 or 8 pounds heavier. So there are diet and gene interactions. So the question becomes, are you doomed? And really the answer is no. The answer is no. There's so many different genes that are involved in obesity and weight management, hunger and satiety. We have literally just scratched the surface. So the psychology of knowing this, depending on your own beliefs, right? The psychology of knowing this may not be good for you. You may look at this and say, okay, I'm doomed. And okay, I am trying to fit this body into skinny jeans and I actually have a fat gene. And that isn't going to work for me, and so I might as well not try. And I think that's when I'm seeing some of this stuff come out in the lay literature, not in the scientific literature, but in the lay literature. I'm going to say this is going to be our new frontier of why we eat what we do, and it could be the psychology of knowing what your DNA is. Or you could say, you know what? I don't have any of those high-risk genes, so that means I can eat whatever I want to eat. That is also factually not true. So calorie balance always matters. So as we look at this, why we eat what we do, we're left with a lot of different things to think about. Our food choices are complex. They're the interaction between culture, upbringing, society, media, and genetics. Recognizing our beliefs and how we act on those and our behaviors associated with those beliefs is really part of developing these comprehensive wellness program. So when you start to challenge what you believe about food or what you believe about exercise, taking a look at your own day, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, taking a look at the science, the whole idea is we're not all identical twins. We're all going to need a slightly different program. But at least if you understand why you eat what you do and what you can do to modify it, we're on our way to wellness. So thank you all very much.